Hey everybody, today we are focusing on lesson 5 in chapter 6. We're still focusing on algebra, and today we're going to be learning about properties. Okay, so there's 3 properties that we are going to be learning. But first, let's talk about what a property is. So that's going to be one of our vocab words today. So a property is a statement that is true for all numbers. Okay, so a property is a statement that is true for all numbers. So all the properties that we're going to be talking about today, which is the commutative property, the associative property, and the identity property, those properties that we're going to have, they are going to be, it's going to be a statement that is true for all numbers. So, and properties, they're usually true for addition, and then they're usually true for multiplication. Okay, so we're going to show 2 different examples, one with addition and one with multiplication. So first we're going to talk about the commutative property. So with the commutative property, it states that it doesn't matter what order you put the numbers in. If you're adding or if you're multiplying, you'll come up with the same answer. Okay, so for example, and I'm going to make a line down the middle. So for example, if we have 5 plus 3 and 3 plus 5, okay, this is the same thing, 5 plus 3 and 3 plus 5. And if you're still unsure if it's the same thing, we can try solving it. So 5 plus 3 is 8. We're going to ignore this side and we just solve that side. Now we're going to ignore this side and solve this side. Okay, so 3 plus 5 is 8. So we come up with the same answer. This tells us that they are equivalent. Okay, so we have equivalent expressions. Alright, so let's try an example on the multiplication side. So with multiplication, it's going to be a little different in the sense that we're multiplying. Okay, so 4 times 6 equals 6 times 4. Okay, so these are telling us the same thing. They're in a different order, but we're using the same numbers and we'll get the same answer. So 4 times 6 is 24, and 6 times 4 is 24. So it's still an equivalent expression. Okay, let's try it with variables though, because it's the same thing, but sometimes when we see variables, it can be confusing to try to do it for the first time. So the variables we're going to use are a and b, and we're just going to use them as general variables. So let's say we have the variable a for any number plus b, also any number, equals b plus a. Okay, I am using the same variables on both sides of the equation, but I have them in a different order. And I'll still come up with this same answer. Okay, just like if I use it for the multiplication side, when I multiply them, if I multiplied a times b, okay, a times b, and I switch the order on this side to multiply b times a, I'm going to come up with the same answer even though they're in a different order. Okay. That is what's called the commutative property. Okay, so order doesn't matter with the commutative property. All right, so the next property that we're going to talk about, it's going to be just a little different, but it's still going to have an addition and multiplication example, okay? So let's say we have the expression 3 plus 9 plus 4, and then 9 plus 4 are in parentheses. Well, running out of space here, but we're going to do the same thing. We're going to use the same numbers on this side of the equation, but we're going to change where the parentheses is. So if we have 3 plus 9 in parentheses plus 4, okay, so both sides are a little bit different. But let's see if we come up with the same answer. So we're going to ignore this side of the equation, and we're going to try to solve it over here. So I'm going to do what's in parentheses first, following order of operations. 9 plus 4 is 13, plus 3. 3 plus 13 is 16. Now I'm going to do this side of the equation, ignoring this side. 3 plus 9 is 12. Plus 4. 12 plus 4 is 16. So I come up with the same answer. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but on the multiplication side of it. So with the multiplication side, I'm multiplying the numbers. So let's say I had 3 times 2 times 4. 2 times 4 is in parentheses, and 3 times 2 times 4. Okay, so notice something here. I'm using the same numbers on both sides of the equation. 3, 2, and 4, 3, 2, and 4. But the one thing that's different is that the parentheses, it's in a different spot. So here I have 2 times 4 in the parentheses, and here I have 3 times 2 in the parentheses. Okay, so let's see what happens when we multiply this through on both sides. So again, I'm ignoring that side of the equation. So 2 times 4 is 8, times 3 is 24. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. This time I'm multiplying 3 times 2, get 6. Times 4, we still get 24. Okay, so the only thing we changed here was where the parentheses go. Okay, so this property is called the associative property. And with the associative property, grouping doesn't matter. Okay, so in the commutative property, order didn't matter, how you ordered them, if you're adding or if you're multiplying. And with the associative property, the way you group them doesn't matter. So when I say group, I mean where the parentheses go. So here I had 9 plus 4 grouped, but on this side of the equation I had 3 plus 9 grouped, and I still came up with the same answer. Similarly over here, I had 2 times 4 grouped, but on this side I had 3 times 2 grouped. But I'm multiplying everything, so it didn't matter, and I still came up with this, the same answer. So grouping doesn't matter. Okay, And then the last property that we're going to review is called the identity property. Okay, so think of yourself and the identity you have for yourself. Okay, let's say if my identity was 5, okay, I have to think, what can I add to this 5 so that my identity doesn't change? So that the identity of this 5 does not change. Okay? If I think about it, 5 plus something equals 5. Well, I know if I add 0, the identity of this 5 will not change. So 5 plus 0 equals 5. Okay? And if I try to use a variable with this, so if I'm using a as my variable, and a can be any number, if I add 0 to it, I'm still going to get a. Okay? So that's the additive identity, 0. Okay, so we call 0 the additive identity because whatever number we add it to, when we're adding, okay, we're still going to get the original identity of that number. So a plus 0 equals a. 5 plus 0 equals 5. So the identity of the number does not change. Now, when we try the same thing on the multiplication side, let's say we have 7. 7 times what would still give us 7? We have to think. Well, if we used 0, 7 times 0, that would change the identity of our number. 7 times 0 would be 0. So it can't be 0. So it's not the same. Okay, but 7 times 1 would not change our identity. It would keep the identity of our number. So 7 times 1 equals 7. If we try it with a variable, let's say we have the variable a, and a is any number. If we multiply it with 1, we still get a. A times 1 is a. And 1 is the multiplicative identity. Okay, so now we are going to practice some of what you are going to be doing in class today. You're just going to be comparing expressions and determining whether they have one of these properties. Okay, so if they are equivalent, they should have one of these properties, and if they are not equivalent, explain why they are not equivalent. So you're going to have two expressions, okay, and you're going to first determine, are they equivalent? Second, you're going to determine, or if they are equivalent, so if yes, which property? So is it the commutative property, where order doesn't matter? Is it the associative property, where grouping doesn't matter? Or is it the identity property? Okay, and last, if they are not equivalent, why? So explain why if they are not equivalent. So here are your two expressions, 15 plus 5 plus 8 in parentheses, and 15 plus 5 plus 8. Okay, so I'm going to ignore this, and I'm just going to go through and solve. when I go through and solve this side first, that's how I'm determining if they are equivalent. So 15, I'm going to do what's in parentheses first. 5 plus 8 is 13. 15 plus 13 is 28. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. 15 plus 5 is 20. And then I'm going to add 8. So 20 plus 8, I get 28. So are they equivalent? Yes, they are equivalent. Okay? So because they are equivalent, I have to determine why. Okay, and if I look over here and I look at my expressions, I notice that I see parentheses. Okay, I see that I'm using the same numbers, 15, 5, 8, 15, 5, 8, but the grouping is different on both sides. And I notice the same thing over here where they use the same numbers on both sides, but the grouping is different. So I know it's the associative property. Okay, and then one other thing to note, is it the associative property with the addition or multiplication? And since we're adding, it's going to be with addition. So associative property of addition. And that's it.